Hello, greetings to everyone joining us today. Welcome to the Productivity Talk. This is the signature space for Asian Productivity Organization where experts, professionals, and thinkers come together to spark ideas that move productivity forward. In this session, we dive into perspectives that challenge and inspire and elevate how we lead and manage in the fast-changing world. From every corner of Asia Pacific region and beyond, we appreciate you joining this collective journey of learning. I'm your host, Anar Bayersachen from the APO Secretariat, and I look forward to exploring today's insights together with our distinguished guest speaker. The world is changing rapidly with increasing complexity, uncertainty, and interconnected challenges. Whether it's public or private, all organizations are facing pressure to transform in ways that are sustainable, systemic, and forward-looking to meet today's socioeconomic needs. And this leads our session to focus on systemic organizational change for sustainable productivity. This topic goes straight to the heart of the complex transitions that all kinds of organizations are navigating today. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Mr. Thomas Gebhardt, currently working as a senior international consultant and managing director at Equilibrium Foundation, Germany. He has extensive cross-functional and international experiences across Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. He is highly experienced in public and private, as well as the international development sectors that give him a deep understanding of organizational changes across different institutional environments. His extensive experience is focused on driving sustainable productivity by addressing organizational change as a whole, rather than treating challenge as a single, isolated parts. Across his diverse roles as a senior consultant in Europe, managing director of international organization, advisor to senior management teams across different regions, he has consistently applied holistic, systemic approach built on three main pillars: leadership empowerment, strategic performance management, and integrated management systems. He believes that traditional linear methods of change are no longer effective. That's why today he will talk about systemic organizational change framework for sustainable productivity. Thomas, thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to share your insights. Thank you so much.
Yes, good day, Anna. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation. It is an honor to speak at the APO. Today, I will speak about one thing that really decides whether productivity grows or stagnates in the coming decade: how we enable people, processes, culture, and technology to progress together in order to achieve sustainable productivity. That is the essence of systemic organizational change. If we look at the agenda, first we will start with the hard facts of the global productivity challenges. Next, we will see why traditional changes fail. Third, we will then explore how systemic organizational change works in practice with two case studies. Afterwards, I will demonstrate the results of systemic change in terms of productivity. And finally, we will recognize how AI enables productivity and see clear action steps for your organization. Okay, let's start with the challenging reality we all face. Despite huge investments in technology, global productivity growth has slowed down. We are spending more money, but we are getting less return. This slide shows the four main reasons why. First, look at stagnation despite investment. Companies everywhere invest billions in digital tools and cloud systems, but the productivity results are small. Second, we have reached an optimization plateau. This means we have hit a limit. Our traditional management methods, like business process re-engineering, have already improved our old processes. We cannot squeeze more efficiency out. Third, there is a challenge of skills and demographics. In many countries, the workforce is getting older, and at the same time, we lack the right skilled people. Finally, we work in a volatile environment. The world is changing very fast. Market shifts overnight. Our old organizational structures are too rigid, and they are not built to handle these rapid changes. And these 4 points show us one thing. The problem is not just about technology and investments. No, the problem is that our current organizational adaptation methods are not successful anymore. Okay, now let's have a look at the data across the APO economies. The average productivity growth has fallen to 2.3% per year. Second, we have a huge competitive risk, a 45% point gap in digital maturity between leaders and the rest. And the third number has not changed in 20 years. 70% of all major change programs fail. This failure is not due to a lack of resources or technology. It is because we optimize pieces brilliantly, but the whole system still stagnates. And why is that happening? Because we haven't changed the operating systems of our organization. To understand that better, we will investigate past change failures now and come to the next slide. Yes, let's have a look on some examples of traditional change failures. The failures of traditional change interventions reveal a common critical pattern. They ignore organizational interdependencies. Take the example of General Electric. They attempted a massive digital change with top-down mandates, but they failed because they did not address the cultural resistance and siloed operations simultaneously. You can see the results. It was 23 billion lost. The key lessons here is clear. Technology-first approaches fail without simultaneous culture and capability development. Then consider Boeing, the other example. Do you all remember the 2 plane crashes of Boeing in 2018, 2019 of the 737 MAX 8? This was not a technology failure, but a cultural one. Boeing prioritized speed and cost cutting over the systemic quality and safety culture. They ignored critical feedback loops from engineers. This single dimension optimization destroyed the systemic performance and led directly to crisis and the collapse of organizational trust. These 2 cases prove that if you optimize only one part very good, it's a fragmented change. And now we will have a look why 70% of change initiatives fail. Across all industry, we repeatedly see the same patterns. Organizations are treated like machines. Change is planned like an engineering project. The functions operate in silos. Decision-making is slow and inconsistent. And when technology is introduced, the behaviors, they don't change. This leads directly to the 4 core flaws visible on the left. We have a linear rollout in silos, which prevent cross-functional collaboration. And this ignores Peter Drucker's truth that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Second, reactive. We miss the chance to use predictive data and adapt. Third, top-down. This ignores the simple fact that change is designed for predictability and not for complexity, the existing change. And fourth, one-time event. This approach ensures resistance because the lack of participation drives resistance when employees feel change is heavily imposed. In other words, organizations try to solve complex adaptive challenges with mechanical linear tools. So we need to look deeper into the causes of that. What exactly is the main cause of change failure? We see here the Shine's iceberg model of organizational culture. And this is our essential diagnostic tool. The problem is more or less simple. Most change initiatives focus only on organizational structures, processes, systems, and KPIs. These elements are visible above the waterline. We can all see them. But they are only half of the picture. They are the artifacts of the culture, we say. And you can change the reporting lines in a week, but the core issue remains. This is because successful organizational change requires changing what's below the surface. We must target the invisible 90% of the iceberg. Yes. So 90% of all these topics are below the surface. First, the beliefs and values that people say they hold. For example, we value teamwork and customer focus, kind of value. More profoundly, the hidden norms, the next point, the unspoken rules of how we really do things here. For example, never report bad to the news to the boss, or it's safer to work slowly than to make a mistake. And finally, we have the deep core assumptions people use to interpret the world. For example, only the CEO makes strategic decisions, or innovation is too risky for our sector. So these are very huge, big beliefs, core assumptions. Traditional change works mostly above the waterline. But if these deep layers, the mindsets, the habits and assumptions don't shift, no digital tool, no reorganization, and no leadership program will stick. The culture will simply pull the organization back to its comfort zone. Systemic change works on both levels simultaneously, turning those hidden assumptions into a conscious process and create sustainable outcomes. If we have a look now, what is organizational systemic change? What does it really mean? That is the alternative. The alternative to the linear traditional models is a systemic organizational change. This approach recognizes that organizations are living systems and not machines. Change isn't a single event. It becomes an operating system that is integrated and adaptive. The core principle here is interconnectedness. The systemic change recognizes that people, processes, culture, and external factors influence everything else. We don't try to fix a single process or technology. Instead, we align all interconnected elements so that they reinforce each together, creating a momentum rather than resistance. And this is where productivity gains become truly sustainable. Our model, we can see here, shows us the four critical dimensions. We must align simultaneously, first, the people dimension. This dimension ensures human capacity. Here we focus on leadership capacity building, shifting leaders to be adaptive, and ensuring psychological safety so people are allowed to experiment. This is the foundation for genuine engagement. The second dimension, the process dimension. This focuses on how work gets done. We move to end-to-end optimization, adopting agile methodologies and ensuring data-driven decision-making is embedded in every workflow. Then we come to the third dimension, the culture. This is the heart of the iceberg we have seen. We focus here on establishing shared values and purpose and driving collaborative behaviors. This enables the innovation mindsets, and this is needed for a long-term survival. Finally, and very important as well, the external dimension. This ensures the organization remains competitive. We need to focus on maintaining market challenges and the speed at which the entire system can adapt. By aligning these four dimensions, we stop managing silos and start managing the whole system in a flow. This holistic approach is the way to deliver sustained productivity gains. And the very most important part inside of it is the new leadership concept as a central pillar, because the leadership is the core. Without change from the top and in the mindset from the leadership on the top, we cannot have a systemic change and it will fail. The core principle here is that leaders must move from issuing direction to enabling direction, creating ownership and flow. They must shift their role from control to enablement. We can look at the words of Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who perfectly summarizes this new paradigm. Leadership is not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those in your charge. So you need to be in charge of your stuff. This shift is rooted in 4 areas, all emphasizing trust, empowerment, collaboration, and adaptability. First, we have the transformative vision. Leaders must articulate a clear purpose-driven goal for others to act independently. Then we have the shared leadership. They actively distribute decision-making, moving away from the single point of failure, the CEO, and leveraging collective intelligence across the organization. Third, inclusive engagement. What does it mean? Leaders must create psychological safety, making it safe to speak up, to experiment. That fuels innovation and adaptation. And the last one, agile adaptation. That means we need to support continuous digital experimentation and rapid iteration, replacing the one-time annual strategic plan. The shift here is clear. We are moving from control to enablement. Leaders become sense makers, connecting people, purposes, and processes. Now let's have a look at how can we work with practical methods in the organizations. How can we realize and implement this approach, the systemic organizational change? If we have here Kotter's 8 steps and the 6-step cycle practical methods, which are proven. And as we now know, the required mindset is adaptive leadership. We need to know how do we implement it into the organization, into practice. Maybe some of you know on the left side, Kotter's 8-step model. It is excellent for directional alignment and for creating initial urgency. But Kotter is fundamentally linear, and therefore we need the systemic six-step cycle on the right. This cycle is built for permanent change because it demands iteration and data-enabled learning. And this is the newest method how we implement systemic organizational change. Let's quickly walk through the loop. First, to detect needs. We start by identifying systemic barriers across the organization's 4 dimensions we have seen before: people, process, culture, and technology. Second, we co-create solutions. What does it mean? We bring together stakeholders to jointly design solutions, and we foster distributed ownership. Participation is the key here. Third, then we start small. We test in pilots. We don't implement company-wide in the beginning. No, we test a solution in a small defined area to test it. Fourth, the lessons learned. We need to analyze the data and the behavioral alignment, focusing worked, what not, and why. So what are the lessons learned? And what do we need to enlarge and what not? And this creates our feedback loop. Fifth, the scale is about implementation. This is the logical expansion, where we take the successful solution and implement it across relevant departments or regions. And the last one, 6, is the integration into the system to make it sustainable. This step is where we formally embed the new behavior and process into the organization's structures. This means anchoring the change, for example, in the formal HR processes, adjusting the budget allocation, and ensuring that the new method is part of our core assumptions, as we have learned that these are very important. Finally, the systemic cycle operates as a living loop. It's a living system, adaptive system, and not a one-time sequence. It works by embedding key elements of modern change. And now if you compare it to the Kotter's 8 steps, you can see the difference. Kotter's 8 step is working and was working, but it still can be improved. Now let's have a look on the case studies, on the cases, how systemic organization change was implemented in real life, in organizations. Let's talk about DBS Bank. And here we have the culture first change with Kotter, with the Kotter method. And now we see what this systemic approach looks like in a real life. So the DBS Bank in Singapore began a large-scale change in 2009. And their ambition was very bold: to turn a traditional hierarchical bank into a 22,000 person startup. So DBS understood the lessons from the iceberg model. They focused first on culture. They knew they had to empower people to shift the mindset and then redesign the culture and enable innovation at a scale. This change used technology as an enabler rather than as a core solution. Crucially, this entire vision was driven by the CEO, Piyush Gupta, whose adaptive leadership style was instrumental in framing the bank's shift from a siloed institution to one focused on simplicity and customer obsession. So here are some key implementation highlights. The DBS achieved this systemic shift through 4 major interconnected interventions. 1, the structural redesign. They implemented a matrix organization to break down deep-seated silos and accelerate decision-making. This focused on rapid decision-making and human-centered processes. 2, the process change. They executed Agile at scale. They trained over 8,000 employees in Agile methods, creating tribes, squads, and chapters. And that delivered value very quickly. This focused on simplification at scale by empowering teams. Then 3, the technology integration. They deployed AI-powered insights through process mining and analytics to identify workflow bottlenecks and automate routine tasks. This enabled AI to free staff for higher value and customer obsession work. Number 4, the continuous capability building is very important. They invested heavily in learning culture by launching internal academies and hackathons. This focused on building digital skills and encouraging continuous experimentation and innovation. Crucially, DBS used the Kotter's 8-step model, especially the early steps like creating urgency and forming a guiding coalition to align the organization and gain the initial buy-in for this cultural change. The DBS success confirms the system principle. They strategically aligned first the people, then the processes, and then the culture, before accelerating with the technology. Now let's have a look at the measurable impact of this approach. Was it successful? Yes, we can say yes. So we have seen the previous slide showed the culture first action. Now we see the DBS Bank achieved extraordinary results. The market cap growth exploded from 22 billion to 97 billion, making DBS Asia's most valuable bank. This is significant value creation driven by systemic change. Financially, they reduced their cost-to-income ratio from 51% down to an industry-leading 40% efficiency. But real success is reflected in the cultural and customer metrics. The decision cycle time was dramatically reduced through empowered teams and leading to a much faster decisions. The high figure of digital adoption with 85% is a direct measure of employee engagement with the new tools and platforms across the entire organization. And then let's have a look at the stronger retention. The employee retention improved by 25% due to their culture of empowerment and growth. Finally, their net promoter score, the NPS, surged from 54 to a sector-leading 92, providing customer obsession works. So DBS proves that focusing on culture and systemic alignment first is a very fast way to achieve unparalleled financial and productivity outcomes, which are sustainable, we have to say. And now let's have a look. How does it look, a practical case with the 6-step cycle? Because we have learned that this is the even more modern version of the systemic change tool. And we can see here the ABB group. Yeah, so from the industry, and they took a system first approach and not a culture first approach. So they focused on a global initiative linking leadership, and technology. ABB, a global industrial leader, started 2016 this systemic change program across over 100 countries. The focus was on standardizing processes, strong co-creation with local teams, and using a network of ambassadors for effective change. The core principle was this: iteration and co-creation build ownership at every level. The cyclical approach allowed ABB to maintain momentum while continuously adapting to market changes. We have this diagram now, and it shows their systemic 6-step cycle in action. First, plan. The co-creation workshops. Senior leaders and frontline teams jointly designed the change roadmap together, so participation. Second, engage. Ambassador network. They trained over 2,000 change ambassadors to champion new ways of working across local sites. Third, execute. The pilot and scale. ABB launched pilots in 15 sites where they used AI-enabled productivity tools. And fourth, align the culture and systems. AI-enabled productivity tools were formally integrated to provide the digital backbone and needed for real-time decision-making. And they redesigned the performance management together with the reward systems to formally support the new behaviors. And fifth, reflect the learning cycle, the learning period. They used quarterly retrospectives to capture lessons and identify necessary adjustments. And this is the feedback loop. And finally, 6, sustain, embedding practices. They formally integrated new behaviors into standard operating procedures, recruitment and onboarding processes. So the ABB group proved that this systemic cycle is the most effective tool for integrating operational excellence and the cultural change on a massive global scale. Let's have a look how successful was the intervention, how the project, the change project from ABB. And we can see that the ABB case proves that investing in the system health brings a massive financial return. The core driver was the co-creation, ambassador and ambassador networks. They accelerated the adoption. Let's look at the figures. First, operational margin increased by 15% through structural efficiency gains. And second, the digital orders. The revenue share from connected solutions grew by 25%, demonstrating clear market success. Third, time to market was reduced by 30% through streamlined product development cycles. Fifth, a higher collaboration reached 65%, directly driven by the cross-functional ambassador networks we discussed. And last, the unified standards reached 90%, proving that they achieved global process consistency across all sites. So the ABB impact is clear. Changing the internal system, focusing on systemic alignment first, is the most sustainable way to achieve growth and operational excellence. We have now seen that both cases provide that systemic change is not only theory. No, it's a highly practical and measurable. And we can see that as well if we see the typical outcomes from benchmarks from successful systemic change initiatives in different sectors, in different branches. We can see that systemic change methods outperform traditional change methods because they scale learning and not just tasks. And the impact follows a clear measurable flow. It starts on the upper side left with the people and ends with market speed. The human quality driver, we see an employee engagement and employee productivity both show a strong growth, with improvements ranging from 18 to 25%. And this is huge. This is very big. And this increased motivation directly leads to the quality. We see a massive error rate reduction of up to 40%, decreasing costly rework, and it improves the trust. The systemic alignment means that the frontline employee is now delivering high quality that the executive team requires. Let's have a look at the bottom row, at the efficiency and speed outcome. This human energy and improved quality translate directly into process efficiency. We see that the resource utilization improving by 10%, a better usage of personnel and machines. This improved quality and efficiency then drives speed. The cycle time reduction of up to 35%, shortening entire process durations. And finally, time to market speeds up by 28%. And this accelerates the launch of new products and services. So the systemic organizational change delivers very measurable performance improvements across all key business metrics at the same time. This is the definition of more sustainable productivity, and it proves that the system works. Now, let's have a look at the future. What is happening in the future? And especially the combination between systemic organizational change and the artificial intelligence. What happens when we introduce AI into the systemic organizational change approach? The key insight here is that the future of AI is not a replacement for systemic change. AI is a multiplier. It's about creating human AI partnerships, and it will amplify our collective intelligence. So the slide shows the 4 key enablers for sustainable productivity that AI drives. First, we have the scaled personalization. AI solves the problem of one-size-fits-all training. For example, the AI coach as a sparring partner and dynamic learning paths deliver enterprise consistency with individual relevance. This allows for skill demand alignment and ensuring employee competency directly aligns with current business needs by identifying skill gaps at the same time. Second, the systemic predictive intervention. AI transforms our ability to manage risks. Instead of reacting to failures, we use risk and resilience forensics as an early warning system. This utilizes data to proactively identify structural or cultural weaknesses, like burnout risks or process deviations, before they escalate into major business failures. And this improves process intelligence and strengthens feedback loops, so we can use it directly in our learning cycle. Third, the AI-empowered leadership. Intelligence-augmented leadership synthesizes vast data into precise, actionable insights, and it significantly improves the quality and speed of strategic decision-making. This enables de-risk forecasting and helps change human bias mitigation. The last, real-time learning loops. AI makes the systemic change management cycle truly a continuous one. The adaptive feedback architecture enables real-time adaptation rather than slow annual review cycles. It creates a systemic iteration engine that automatically tests and scales patterns across the entire organization. So the conclusion is powerful. By combining holistic change frameworks with AI enablement, we can achieve 10 to 15% additional productivity gains beyond traditional approaches alone. This is the ROI of systemic change management in the age of AI. Then, now, what will we do? What can I do as an organization? What are the most important action steps to start the systemic organization change? Now we have the clear vision, and the crucial question is, how do we implement it? The motto is think big, start small, as we have seen, and act now. So the goal is not perfection, it's momentum. We achieve this momentum through 3 sequential action steps to change the system and the people. First, we need the analysis, diagnose systemic constraints. We start by making the invisible visible. The step is to map the interdependencies across people, process, culture, and environment. We must identify where are the barriers which are most acute and where we can have quick wins. This involves stakeholder interviews, analysis of workflow bottlenecks, and we need to assess the cultural readiness. The second step, the enabler. We need to build enabling leadership. As we have seen that leadership from the top is the key, the next step is to prepare the change agents. We must develop leadership capability and facilitate emergence rather than control outcomes. This means we train leaders in system thinking, to see the whole picture, to implement an adaptive leadership style, and to help the employees to a learning-oriented mindset. So it will move from control to enablement. The last one, number 3, is the iteration, as we have already heard. We need to pilot, to learn, and then scale. So here we have seen that finally, if we execute the change using the systemic 6-step cycle, we start with contained experiments. We launch small-scale pilots in defined domains or test beds that test systemic principles. We capture learning rapidly, adjust based on feedback, and only then expand scope with proven approaches. If we follow these 3 steps, you lay the foundation for sustainable productivity, ensuring that every effort reinforces the system. Finally, we now stand at a critical crossroads. The future of productivity, as we have seen in the beginning, is not about choosing between human or AI. It is not about focusing only on culture or only on processes. It's about creating the right systemic partnership between all of them. Thank you very much for your time. And now I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your insightful presentations. I'm sure our viewers have many questions to ask. So let's begin our discussion, and I would like to start with a few questions. Let's start from the bigger picture. As you said in the presentation, you mentioned culture eats strategy as a breakfast. So what are the biggest obstacles, like a culture, in organizations face today when they're trying to implement systemic organizational change? How would you overcome those, each of them, and why are those obstacles most critical?
Yeah, thank you very much for that good question, because that is very important for us to know where then we need to change with the change. So the 70% failure rate we discussed in the beginning is a result of three critical systemic, I would say, killers that I encounter in almost every country and organization. Fixing these three can bring, can flip the failure rate to a 70% success rate, I would say. The first killer is the linear thinking in a non-linear world. Companies still treat change like an engineering project, as we have seen in the presentation. They want a rigid 24 months Gantt chart for something that is fundamentally adaptive. And as soon as reality drifts, and it always does, the whole plan collapses and the internal trust is gone then. So what is the solution? How can we overcome that critical factor? You must replace the long-term Gantt chart with a rolling 90-day learning cycles. So this is an agile method. Maybe some of you know this already from programming of software. So they took this agile method for the systemic change. This means, and there you define clear, measurable key results for the next quarter, paired with explicit safe-to-try budgets. And this embraces the systemic six-step cycle we have seen today as well. And it replaces static planning with continuous adaptation. The second killer is middle management sabotage. They do it not by intention, but middle managers are the make or break layer. They are measured normally on this year's profit and losses and asked to spend 30% of their time on change work is difficult. Without redesigning of the KPIs for them and real senior commitment, they will always deprioritize the future to survive today. So the solution here would be give them dual KPIs. For example, 70% is for your performance and 30% is for change objectives. And you need, of course, always the non-negotiable senior commitment in the executives' reviews. This strategic alignment ensures their performance evaluation reflects the urgency. The third killer is underestimating the cultural depths. So everyone agrees when you say culture eats strategy, but then they still try to change culture with town hall meetings and new value posters. But the real culture sits in the unspoken assumptions, the hidden norms we saw in the iceberg model. Who really has power here? Is it safe to speak up? So the solution here would be you address it by measuring and discussing the unspoken assumptions. You need to talk about it, about the power, about safety, about risk, about failures, about problems. Every quarter, you need to talk about that. And parallel, you can use anonymous pulse surveys to get a real honest opinion about the process. And you need to do workshops, of course. So then you can hopefully make the invisible visible.
Thank you. Thank you very much for very practical the comments and the answering. And Thomas, I think we have to also let's bring this closer to the more operational level because you mentioned a couple of examples in operation. So please, answer in very practical standpoint of view. What can middle managers start doing practically and immediately to keep systemic organizational change alive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. As we have seen, the middle management is as well very important in the whole process. They are the essential multipliers for to make a systemic change and to make a reality on the ground, because they are between the top management and the employees. And since there's no budget for grand projects, you must start small to change behaviors. I see 4 actions middle managers can start immediately. You could start tomorrow, and you would not need extra money for that. First, for example, you can run a weekly 15-minute cross-functional stand-up meeting. So this simple change, even if it's only 5 people from different silos, start to tracking down the boundaries, and it pushes the problem solving across functions. So communication is the key. This builds collaboration norms, and this we need for the change. Second, translate the big vision into one concrete team experiment this quarter, and objectives and ideas. Talk with them about the vision. How can we translate it into a quarterly measurable objective? Make it real for them and handable. So one pilot is better than 10 PowerPoint slides, I would say. So you need to localize the change and test it with people. So then they by themselves initiate and make it bigger. Third, protect teams' time. You need to protect teams' time for the change. So maybe you block 10 to 20% of the calendar for learning and improvement for these intersectional meetings. And the last one, you need, as a middle manager, you need to become a talent broker and not a gatekeeper. So you need to connect people across the departments. As we have seen at ABB, the ambassador networks, so that it worked. So there were 2,000 change ambassadors, and 95% of them were middle managers. So start simple and start to communicate between departments. I think this is something which middle manager can do immediately.
Thank you so much. Start simple, act as soon as possible. So in your presentations, you mentioned the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. So I think it's now it's time to talk about the leadership of the high leadership teams. So how can those top leadership teams change in terms of mindset and structure to ensure systemic organizational change truly succeeds?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned it in the presentation, the fundamental shift for the top leadership is from the hero leader, who provides all the answers, to the system architect and gardener. So now we call it gardener, this picture of the top leader, like the CEO, and he or she creates the conditions for success. So, and this needs behavioral changes. For example, from giving always answers, you can make questions, asking powerful questions. You are leading by questions, and this is like a coach approach. So you let the employees, the middle manager, reflect, so they find solutions, and you can use, and together you use the energy and creativity. So the leader's must model is curiosity. So I think Nadella's famous question was, what don't we know? Yeah, we are always talking about what we know, but what we don't know. This is a perfect example where you shift the culture from compliance to learning. And as well, you give them this psychological safety that they can answer that question, and it's not bad. Second, you need control, you need step away from controlling to creating conditions to learn. So you must remove the organizational barriers. Often the top management created them by themselves. For example, at ABB, the breakthrough came when country managers stopped micromanaging local pilots and started removing the bureaucratic hurdles. So you need to distribute the intelligence of the organization. And another important topic for the top management is you need to change from annual strategy PowerPoints to constantly making decisions inside of the organizations. So this constant communication addresses the lack of clarity, because very often we have the annual goals, but during the year, we don't know where we are. And this reduces anxiety as well and gives transparency. And last but not least, the top leader needs to learn they are not the smartest person in the room. Yeah, you need to get the smartest people to collaborate. So you need to find a very good team. You need to share the success. I often tell CEOs, your new job is to increase the collective intelligence of the organization and not to prove your own. So this is a mindset shift, I would say.
Thank you for your insightful points. So we have a top leaders. Now we have the mid, the managers. I think it's now also we have to talk about the evidence and impacts. How do we determine whether systemic organizational change is actually succeeding and improving productivity? And that what tools or measurement approaches can be used to track those productivity gains?
Yes, I mean, this is a central question. Does it make sense? No, it needs to make sense in a sustainable way. We want to increase productivity, and so the success inside of the systemic organization change approach means we use a holistic measurement system. So we have two pillars. First, the change delivers sustainable outcomes, results-based management, RBM. And second, it's important that the organization is improving its systemic health. We call it systemic health. Objectives and key results, the OKR. So the change approach synthesizes RBM, OKR, and KPIs across 3 systemic levels. And there we use specific tools. For example, we call it level C. We start with level C. It's a systemic and cultural health. That is the foundation. This measures the adaptive capacity, the system's ability to learn and adapt. For example, what are KPIs here? We have employee engagement. We have seen in the examples. We have the systemic iteration rate, the speed of scaling pilots. And here we use different tools. For example, pulse surveys, communication analytics, to provide real-time data, and to detect the health of the culture. And this is a big change to classical measurement systematics, I would say. And this must be aligned, of course, with the OKR objective. So now we come to the second level, B, the execution. We call that the systemic motor. This measures the efficiency and quality of daily execution. We have different KPIs. For example, the error rate reduction, a drop of up to 40% confirms quality standards are embedded, for example, and cycle time reduction. For example, 35% process improvement. And here we use different tools. We have process mining software, ERP, and CRM logs, and these provide us the needed data. And the last is the level A. Now we come to the financial and outcome matrix, of course, very important in the organization, the end result. So this confirms the final ROI. We have here KPIs like cost to income ratio, like at the DBS, the operational margin at the ABB, to come to a conclusion that the success is achieved only when all these three levels are healthy and aligned. So, for example, if level A, the cost to income ratio improves, but level C, the employee engagement drops, the productivity gain is unsustainable. It's not sustainable. So we need a holistic combination of these different methods.
Thank you, Thomas. So organizations often struggle with tension between immediate result or the transformation because systemic change takes time. So how should organization balance short-term performance pressure with the need for long-term systemic change, and what are the best strategies for short-term and mid-term implementation?
Yes, of course, and this is a huge challenge, and you need an argument to overcome this challenge, to implement, to start with systemic change. So the thing is, you don't choose between short and long term. You must run two operating systems at the same time. So as we saw implemented at the ABB case, for example, the one that keeps choosing between fails. So you need to do it at the same time. For example, you need first protect 10 to 20% of your capacity for the future system. You need to make an investment. This time is used for learning, and the change, and it must be non-negotiable. You need to have it. If not, it does not make sense to start. And this prevents the urgent needs of the present from consuming the strategic capacity needed for the future. Second, you need to design first small pilots. So small, they deliver measurable value within the first 3 months. So if you need to demonstrate the success, of course, of your pilots in the first months, and they need to be simple, and you need to connect it to the end-to-end customer journey. So the perspective of the customer is very important here. You can have very quick wins here. And you can improve the costs, increase the NPS, for example. So you need quick wins. And third, you should use a two-horizon dashboard for communication. On the left side, this year's financial KPIs, the short term, and the right side, we track the transformation, the change health, so employee engagement, iteration rate, etc. So you need to make it visible. You need to make the change and visible, and to have a dashboard, like a change dashboard, where the people, the employees, and the senior management can see transparent what is happening. And as well, you need to tell the truth. So you won't have success very quick. So you need to be realistic. For example, ABB accepted that they had for the first 2 years slower margins. And this is the reality. You need to be realistic and say, okay, we need to invest time and money, and maybe our margin will not be the best in the next 1 to 3 years.
Thank you very much, giving us highly practical answers. And those topics we can discuss hours and hours. And you have spoken about the matrix governance as a potential enabler for transformation. So for my last questions, we have, because of time constraint. So what are the key advantages and disadvantages of adopting matrix governance model? And when do you think it's the right timing for organization to introduce such a system?
Yeah, thank you for the last question. The matrix is a very important tool for a very specific problem. So the problem is, or the idea is, you breaking rigid silos in complex value change. So what are the key advantages of the matrix? It was the essential structure that finally broke, for example, the old banking silos at the DBS Bank. Yeah. The decision speed went up to 40% because the product squad had direct access to risk, operations, and tech experts at the same time. The resources were shared instead of duplicated, and people started thinking end-to-end again, customer journey, instead of just my apartment approach and the silo thinking. So in my own projects, I have seen innovation cycles drop from 18 to under 6 months if you use, or if the matrix is stable. Yeah. What are the key disadvantages? The pitfalls are serious. Two bosses mean potentially a chaos. No? The governance could be weak. So the middle managers could be under pressure between the vertical KPIs and the horizontal objectives and promises. So the matrix introduction fails when the incentives stay purely functional, leading to politics and endless meetings. You can avoid these disadvantages. One solution is to change these risks by formally aligning incentives and authority. So this requires non-negotiable senior management commitment. You need to redesign the performance management system and make it in a dual way. You need to implement objectives horizontally and vertically. And you need to give as well bonuses and rewards for collaboration. You need to define that. To the other question, when is it the right time to use it? A matrix should only be implemented when some conditions are met. So first, your value creation is mostly cross-functional. This is true for almost the entire service sector, banking, logistics, and parts of the public sector. So if that is the truth, then it's very good to use the matrix. Second, speed and quality of decisions depend on parallel input from multiple functions like IT, compliance, marketing. And third, you are ready to redesign incentives and performance management at the same time. As we have seen and discussed, the DBS did that exactly. Yeah, you need to have this tool to implement it with the middle management. Finally, for organizations, the matrix is often a very powerful lever to evade these silos. And start with a matrix light could be an option. You could do it in a pilot as well. For example, with squads or with major customer journeys. First to prove it in your organization and then scale it.
Mr. Thomas Gebhardt, so thank you very much for this insightful and highly practical and comprehensive talk. So you have clearly demonstrated how systemic thinking, leadership, and organization culture, of course, the technology, especially AI, artificial intelligence, can integrate to drive sustainable productivity. Thank you very much for you. And to all our viewers, thank you for joining us this P-Talk. Have a wonderful and productive day. Thank you so much.